Aloha everyone, Ronnie Landis here, the host of the official Ronnie Landis podcast show. I'm also the founder of the Holistic Health Mastery Nutrition Certification course, and you can find more information on that at www.holistichealthmastery.com. And I would also really love to encourage you, and I would totally appreciate it, if you can make your way over to the iTunes page for the official Ronnie Landis podcast and just leave a review. If you really enjoy these interviews that we're doing, you're getting a lot of benefit, a lot of education, a lot of entertainment value, leave us a review. Let us know what you think. That way, the podcast gets out to a wider range of audiences. It puts it up higher in their ranking. And I can also see the feedback firsthand to see how we're doing with everything. So, really appreciate that. So, today's interview was really fun. I have to say, it was extremely fascinating. It was engaging. And I had a lot of fun with it. And our guest today is Dr. Gerald Pollack. Dr. Gerald Pollack is the author of a number of really highly acclaimed, award-winning scientific books. His latest book is The Fourth Phase of Water. And this caught my attention about 2 years ago when I was digging deeper into the science of water and the water matrix and just everything going on with water wizardry. And his work came up, and it's a fundamental and powerful discovery that he has uncovered about the stages or the phaseology that water goes through. And some powerful insights came through in this interview. In fact, I wasn't really ready for them, to be honest with you. I knew that this would be interesting. I knew that I would get a lot out of it, but I didn't realize how cool of a gentleman that Dr. Pollack really was and how down to earth he really is. He's a very academically trained scientist and bioengineer, and has written just incredible academic papers and is a university professor. So I wasn't totally sure what to expect, but he is one cool, down-to-earth, sensible individual, and we just had an amazing conversation. This conversation took a lot of different directions. And what I loved about it was that we kept going back and forth with each other. Every time he would say something about water or the nature of this discovery about the fourth phase of water, or what's called the exclusion zone, which you guys are going to find out all about, it popped up a new data point for me that I connected with something else about juicing or raw food or alkaline and acid balance or whatever the thing was. And we kept going back and forth. And I really feel like I was able to complement what he brought to the table. And he certainly was able to do that for me. And I think we both had some aha moments throughout the course of this conversation. So it's exciting, really amazing topic, really amazing insights, some things about water that you probably have never heard about before, and I hope that you enjoy this as much as I did. So without further ado, Dr. Gerald Pollack. Enjoy. Professor Gerald Pollack is founding editor-in-chief of the scientific journal Water and is recognized as an international leader in science and engineering. Pollack's interests have ranged broadly from biological motion and cell biology to the interaction of biological surfaces with aqueous solutions. In his 1990 book, Muscles and Molecules, Uncovering the Principles of Biological Motion, won an Excellence Award from the Society for Technical Communication. Two subsequent books, Cells, Gels, and Engines of Life, and The Fourth Phase of Water, both won that Society's Distinguished Award. Pollack is recognized worldwide as a dynamic speaker and a scientist willing to challenge any long-held dogma that does not fit the facts. and I love that. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Pollack.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ronnie. Very happy to be here with you and your listeners. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. I remember hearing about your work and your discoveries and perspectives on water. I think if I remember correctly, maybe 2 years ago or almost 2 years ago, something like that, where your book, The Fourth Phase of Water, um, it came across my radar, and I had been into the study and science of water wizardry, if you will, as a function for my work as a nutrition specialist. And I just want to say this, for me, just kind of as an introductory and a segue for everything that you're going to share. About 7 years ago, if I remember, I got first introduced to the idea of water, and I know that kind of sounds funny, but I never really made a distinction that water had a distinction. That water was not just this ubiquitous, universal solvent of H2O that was pretty much the same thing. So the water I found in a glass bottle, to a plastic bottle, to the water coming out of my refrigerator, to the water coming out of my tap, or the water in my toilet, was pretty much the same exact substance. I never really had that distinction until I was introduced to spring water, and then I made a practice of going to natural springs and retrieving spring water that came out of the womb of the earth, and so on and so forth. So that led me down a journey of discovering this whole thing around water, and just what an incredibly unique and undiscovered subject it was. And I know we're going to really go into that idea that we don't know everything about water. In fact, it seems that the more we think we know, the more questions arise. So I'm really excited to have you on and to share your insights about this.
Well, yeah, thanks, Ronnie. And sure, there's a lot to be said about different kinds of water. I think what you say is true, that for most people, it's H2O, and if you bother to drink waters that actually cost money at the market or internet, then you're nuts, because everybody knows that water is just H2O. And I think that's one of the reasons why the medical community has not. I mean, apart from some of the scientific community, why the medical community has failed to embrace water as a healing substance, because water is not simply H2O. The different the spring waters, even the holy water. I've seen results presented by physical chemists who looked at some of these holy waters, and holy cow, there really are physical chemical differences. So probably it's safe to say that no two waters are exactly alike. It's not simply a collection of H2O molecules. The stuff that's in the water, what we might call impurities or minerals and such, have a profound effect on the chemistry, the structure, exactly what you're drinking. So I think, yeah, you're really onto something, and it kind of reminds me, just on this topic, about a group in Asia. Probably you know about the Hunza people. Yeah, yeah. So they live, 100, 110, 120. It's not abnormal, and there are stories of having children at age 90 or so. I'm not sure that we would. Not many people would want to do that, but that place attracted a Nobel laureate in the field of fluids, Henry Coanda. And he went there and he was trying to figure out what is it about those people that kept them living so long. And so he found it was the water, that there is highly mineralized water that they drink, and it's so rich with minerals that it's kind of thick. And a lot of tourists go there, and the tourists don't want to drink that water, although they know that the water has huge health value. They don't want to drink it because it looks awful. It's not clear. It's thick with minerals, and so the local people, diligent, industrious, and eager maybe to attract the tourists, they filter it. So the people think they're drinking this wonderful water, which will keep them healthy and impart longevity, but they're not really drinking the real thing. Anyway, main point is that one water is not the same as another water. It kind of comes to what we found. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but we found a distinct difference. We found, when we go to school and we're taught, where everybody's taught that water has three phases, and everybody understands. Yeah, so there's the solid phase. You don't get too much of that in Hawaii, but
not too much unless it's presented to us in like in a grocery store or something, in a freezer.
Yeah, well, yeah, same stuff. Yeah, so that's ice. That's the highly crystalline version of water, and then there's liquid water, and it's a kind of surprise. Ordinary liquid water that we drink every day, that the actual structure, the way the molecules interact with one another, is shocking as it may seem, is not known, and the evidence for its not being known is. In my recent book that you mentioned, The Fourth Phase of Water, I tried to give a picture of what that phase is like, and various prominent scientists around the world think they know what the structure is, and so I give something like a half dozen versions that come from different prominent groups, and the only thing that is consistent among the views of those groups is that all the other people are wrong and they're right. So
would it be safe to say that they are slightly dogmatic about that?
Well, I'm exaggerating a little bit. In fact, that title came from a discussion with a colleague of mine who was dealing with the second law of thermodynamics, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with thermodynamics, but this is one of the disciplines in science that many people like to invoke. So someone comes forth with some idea and very excited about it, and some pompous person stands up and says, "Well, that's a really interesting idea, but it violates the second law of thermodynamics." And of course, the poor soul, being unable to defend himself or herself, quietly backs away, and it's a kind of way of putting things down. And my friend, who's in the field, who deals with the second law of thermodynamics, used that same phrase. He said there are dozens of second laws of thermodynamics, and the only similarity between them is that the person who put forth the idea said all the others are wrong, and everybody is equally dogmatic and arrogant in so doing. So the amusement is, that everybody, of course, thinks that their own idea is better, but the upshot of it is that, there really is no clear, unique statement of this famous second law of thermodynamics. So if you want to use the second law of thermodynamics as a basis for approving or agreeing with some idea or tearing it down, it's really hard to do because there is no unique second law of thermodynamics. Almost all people who are dealing deeply with that disagree with the other people. So if there's no gold standard, it's really hard to say conclusively whether some idea fits or doesn't fit. And so that's anyway. So the main point about ordinary water, we sometimes say bulk water, normal water, whatever, is that surprisingly, it's the simplest and maybe most abundant substance on the face of the earth, and it's all over the universe and beyond. And yet we don't know its structure. It's kind of surprising. And then the third one is, of course, the vapor. And it's odd. In most people's education, there's not much discussion about evaporation. Um, and people don't really discuss it a whole lot. And the ordinary assumption is, well, when things evaporate, so you've got a body of water, and if the water goes from the liquid state to the vapor state, what's really going on is that molecule by molecule, these molecules are getting a kick of energy, and that frees them from the liquid water, and then they evaporate. Well, I have a whole chapter about evaporation in my book, and it's nothing like that. Actually, the evaporative unit is not a molecule of water, but a cluster of billions of molecules of water into these tiny so-called aerosol droplets that rise up. And you can see that if you go into Starbucks and order some hot coffee, and if you see the rising vapor, and you can easily see it against a black background view that shows it, and you can see it's like smoke rising, it's vapor rising. In order for you to see vapor, the particles in the vapor, or the droplets in the vapor, have to be at least the size of the wavelength of light, and that's wavelength of light is roughly half a micrometer. So if you calculate how many water molecules are in this half a micrometer, that's the smallest. It's something like billions, and these droplets that rise are actually bigger than half a micrometer. So anyway, what I want to say is that we all know there are three phases or have known that there are three phases of water. And even among these three conventional phases, the only one that is really clear is that of solid water or ice. The others are not known at all. And so we discovered a phase that's in between the solid phase and the liquid phase. It's kind of gel-like, high viscosity. And this water, the fourth phase, was predicted more than 100 years ago, because people or some scientists realized that if you make a list of all the properties of water and try to explain those properties based on the three phases that we know, it doesn't work. There's something missing from that. And there was lots of evidence up until roughly 1950, more than 100 papers from different sources showing that something strange happens when a liquid meets a solid. It's not just water, but some other liquids too. It changes, it transforms itself completely into something that's almost unrecognizable. And that's what we found in the case of water, that if you immerse some solid in a glass of water or a chamber of water, and if that solid is so-called hydrophilic or water-loving, which means, parenthetically, if you put a piece of this stuff on the table and pour water over it, the water doesn't form a droplet, it spreads out. That means hydrophilic. So we found numerous, if you put numerous hydrophilic substances, any of numerous, in water, the water next to it changes its character completely. There have been, mostly from our lab, but other labs too, some 10 or so different measures of water's properties, chemical, physical. All of them differ. So this is a genuinely new phase, and new, of course, it's been around forever, but you might say newly discovered. And so, of course, the question arises, well, so what? How does that affect me? It affects you profoundly, because this is the water that fills your body, most of your body. It's not H2O. It's this fourth phase. We call it fourth phase. Sometimes we call it EZ water, because EZ it stands for exclusion zone. And what we found, just like ice, that when it forms, it excludes solutes and particles and such, so you get a pure crystal. So as it builds up, it just pushes, like a glacial moraine, it just pushes out all the stuff, and it excludes it. So we called it exclusion zone, and somebody suggested that, well, that Seth suggested this name because we've been seeing this over and over again, and it's an observation. So someone said, call it exclusion zone, not only because it excludes, but also exclusion zone EZ is easy to remember. So
Right.
it turns out it is easy to remember, but it's actually not the most appropriate term. But anyway, that's a lot of history. I'm sorry, I just keep on blabbing, but
No,
you
it's great. I actually wanted to uh, clarify. So when you say exclusion zone, what that sounds like to me, and what I understand from looking into it, is that this fourth phase of water, this exclusion zone, is essentially excluding all non-water molecules. Is that correct? Like impurities?
yes, we can't say all because we haven't studied all,
Hmm.
but you know, all almost all are excluded. Almost no matter what we put in there, big particles, small particles, big molecules like proteins and such, cells like bacteria, virus particles, and even dyes whose molecular weight goes all the way down to maybe 100 or so. They're all excluded,
I see.
and so it's a, it's pretty profound, and so we at first when we discovered it, we were amazed because this exclusion zone is not trivial in size. It's not just one or two molecular layers. It's typically millions of molecular layers, which turns out to be a fraction of a millimeter, and sometimes it's so large that you can see it with your naked eye. And the way we detect it is really simple. We put start with water and some particles. We use spheres. They're called microspheres because they're very small, tiny spheres suspended in the water. And then we immerse the material, and any of numerous materials. And we look in the microscope and we see that these particles are excluded from the region right next to that material, and the size of that zone just keeps growing and growing and growing. And as it grows, it pushes out the microspheres, and you're left with a zone that has excluded the microspheres, and therefore it has the name exclusion zone. And
Mm-hmm.
the exciting part about this is the energy. You need energy to do something like that. And it took us a few years to figure out where that energy might come from. And it came, the discovery was made by, not by some stroke of brilliance or something, but by an undergraduate student who took a lamp in the laboratory, and he shined it on the chamber where this exclusion zone had grown. And if you look at the exclusion zone, it grew enormously with that light. And then he took away the light, and its size reduced back to the standard size. So it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that it looks like light is responsible for building this zone. And we did many experiments, what you might say, scientific experiments, not the way the student did, to follow up, and basically we confirmed that the energy that's responsible for building this zone, and also separating charge, because I mentioned to you that the exclusion was negative and the region beyond is positive.
Mm-hmm.
So when the zone grows, you have this ordered semi-crystalline zone that's building up, and charges are getting separated. So both of those processes need energy, and we didn't have a clue where that energy was coming from. You couldn't take the chamber and plug it into 110 volts or something like that, and and um, and finally, it was this undergraduate student performing his experiment that gave us a clue as to what's going on. And the reason this is important, more than just a scientific curiosity, is that you're exposed to light all the time, especially being in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, well, gee, do you actually use that light? And some of us are cautioned to stay away from light too much, or ultraviolet and such. But this light actually has health benefits. It since we have lots of water inside of us, and as I said, most of it is fourth phase water. But sometimes, when we're ill, our cells are not functioning properly. You may have some aches and pains, or muscle cells that aren't contracting or I should say, aren't relaxing properly. They're kind of cinched up and contracted, and it may well be that we're suffering, or these cells are suffering a kind of dehydration. And
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, we're all familiar with dehydration, but the point is that if you expose yourself to light, light builds this kind of water, which is the normal functional water inside the cell, and so that provides some basis for understanding why light can be therapeutic. And light is used for so many things. It's been used over the ages, but now people are coming to the realization that various wavelengths of light are particularly good for reversing certain pathologies. So light therapy is used, for so many things, including, for reversing depression, for skin issues. And I found out recently, I should have known, but also for the circulation. There are many alternative complementary medical people who expose the blood either simply by sticking a light pipe into the vein and putting ultraviolet at the back end. And the reports are that this is astonishing. It has such good effects on the circulation. So anyway, main point, you're full of water. You need easy water, fourth phase water for function. If you don't have enough of it, your function is impaired, and you can easily you can reverse this by exposing yourself to certain wavelengths of light, which are then absorbed by the water in your body, and you
Mm.
become healthier. A sauna is a good example. Actually, it's a very good example because the light, so to speak, is actually infrared light that comes from, it's heat, and heat and is essentially equivalent to infrared light. There's some technical issues there, but basically, if you have something that's hot, it's generating a lot of infrared light, we can say, or energy. And we found in the laboratory that this kind of light is the light that's principally involved in building this kind of water, infrared. And so, because it's absorbed very readily by water, and so if you think about, you go into the sauna, you feel great when you come out 30 minutes, 20 minutes later, and you wonder why you feel great. Is this some kind of a psychological issue? And it might be, but it also now is understandable on the basis that the infrared energy builds easy water, and you need the easy water in your cells for proper function. So we weren't designed to be depressed, but something is wrong, and this may help to reverse what's wrong.
Yeah, so let me hold you there for a moment. A lot of different connective points have just kind of come together for me when you're talking about the infrared sauna. You're talking about the exclusion zone, or the easy water, the fourth phase of water. That is, you're saying that that's most present in our body. The water that makes up the human tissue system is actually based in the fourth phase of water, opposed to whatever else we may think of as just H2O, for example. So,
Yes.
so what comes up for me is that the connection of the dots that I'm getting is that I was educated that our cells have a certain amount of layers of water molecules that make up the integrity of the cell. And a dehydration is essentially those layers of water molecules start to degrade or dehydrate, and then that's essentially what shrivels up the cell, or deintegrizes, degrades, I guess you could say, the cell essentially, and causes quote unquote disease. Essentially, it's a dehydration. So what I'm getting at is that the infrared sauna idea is really interesting to me, because we're educated on infrared saunas that essentially that infrared light permeates or penetrates, I should say, deeper than the epidermal layers of the skin tissue and goes all the way to the cells and opens up a detox pathway for embedded toxins to go through the detox portals out of the skin, essentially. That's the basic idea. But what you're also saying is that although that may be part of the case, you're actually, what I'm getting from you is the infrared light is what's the best way of saying this? It's bringing more integrity back to the cells, I guess is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, first of all, different infrared wavelengths penetrate to different depths. Some don't penetrate too deeply, some penetrate very deeply. So it depends on the particular wavelength of interest. And there, some of that detox may be correct, but this is a different paradigm. So if you can imagine, inside your cells, there are mostly proteins. The solids inside your cell, I think 80% or 70% are proteins, and it's the proteins that do the work of the cell. So, for example, if you're dealing with a muscle cell, then the muscle proteins, actin, myosin, and some others, do their thing. And doing their thing means some molecule is undergoing a transition from one conformation to another. Let's say it bends or it shrinks or something like that. However, the normal environment for that protein is not sitting in a vacuum. It's actually sitting in easy water. Easy water is a kind of interfacial water. It exists next to hydrophilic surfaces or charged surfaces, and the proteins are exactly that. So picture the protein as a finger or something like this, and around this finger are layers of easy water. That's the normal configuration.
So it's bathing in that water medium, essentially. That's basically that negatively charged water. That easy water is what's giving those proteins its functionality, its electrical charge.
Exactly, that's the point. Exactly,
right.
You hit on it. That's what gives it the functionality. See, when the protein does its thing, like when the muscle contracts, the muscle bends or twists, or the proteins bend or twist or whatever. They do that in the presence of this kind of interfacial, easy fourth phase water. If that water is absent, it's in a very strange environment, and it can't fold, so to speak, in the way it normally folds, and therefore your muscle is not working properly. To get it working properly, you got to rebuild that easy water, and there are many ways that you can do it. And one way is exactly that. One way is expose yourself to light and make sure you've been drinking enough water. So you drink the water, and the light helps convert that water into the easy water that the proteins need for proper function. See, and that's why I believe that's why when you go into the sauna and you walk in tired and grumpy and with aches and pains, and you come out feeling like $1 million.
It charges you then, essentially.
It
charges you.
Yeah, exactly. Charges.
Okay.
So that brings me to the second point, that charges, literally, it charges you literally. And so that's why I guess some of your listeners may know about earthing or grounding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in Hawaii especially, you walk on the beach barefoot, feel good. Yeah. So why do you feel good? Well, you just look around the grandeur, and anybody would feel good. But it's more than that. You're connecting your body to the negative earth. Many people don't know that, but we think, I started as an electrical engineer, and if somebody had told me that the earth has a net negative charge, you could have knocked me over with a feather. It would be impossible, because we all learned that the ground, so to speak, the extra plug when you plug into the wall, it's zero. However, it's not. And I learned this only in the past decade or so. There was a Russian guy who was in my laboratory, and he told me about the Earth's electric field. And I said, "You mean the magnetic field, right?" because we all know about the magnetic field. He said, no, the electric field. So I told him, I said, I studied electrical engineering and nobody ever told me about an electric field. So electric field occurs when you like have two plates, like a capacitor or something, and one is positive and one is negative. So in between those two charged surface, oppositely charged surface, you have an electric field. So he told me, well, there's an electric field on the surface of the Earth, and it's 100 volts per meter. So that means as you stand up, your nose, if you're 6 feet tall, your nose is 200 volts positive with respect to your toes. Now, I said, this is impossible. I've been in electrical stuff my whole life, and I've never heard of such a thing. Well, the next day, one of my students brought me the book by the legendary physicist, Nobel laureate, Richard Feynman, who is the hero of many all physicists, and there was volume 2, chapter 9, talking about the Earth's electric field and the negative charge on the surface of the Earth, and I was just blown over by this. So 50 or 60 years ago, everybody knew about it, and now many people have forgotten that exists, but it's true. There's a lot of evidence, and since the 1950s, when Feynman wrote his lectures, there's not been any kind of refutation of that, but people have forgotten it. So why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing it up because the surface or subsurface area of the Earth is a huge repository of negative charge of electrons. Okay, and we need each cell in our body is negatively charged, and I believe it's negatively charged because of this negatively charged water. There are other views that are more widely accepted. I don't want to get into that. I believe it's a simpler idea, and it's simply that the cells are filled with negatively charged EZ water, therefore they're negative. But if you have a shortage, if you're dehydrated, your cells are short of EZ water, then the cells don't have this large negative electrical potential. They have less of it, and this has been well known for quite a few years. So if you recharge those cells with negativity from the Earth, you walk on the sand or in the water and such, the Earth is surrendering its negative charge to your body and restoring this EZ water, because you need negative charge in order to build it. So the biophysicists who have been studying this for quite a few years understand that that's the rationale, but many people don't realize why it has a therapeutic effect. So this has actually grown into a kind of industry with various products. For example, one product is you take your shoes, and they sell shoes now with some metal at the bottom, plugs of conductor, so that as you walk you can connect yourself to the Earth more frequently than you would if you're wearing insulating shoes. And you can buy bedding with threads, very fine metallic threads running through it, and then you plug it into the ground socket in your wall, or actually connected to a stake that's driven into the Earth. That's better. That's surer. And many people find that if they sleep on bedding that has that they finally can get a good night's sleep. I haven't tried it myself, but I've heard this from enough people. So anyway, the reason I'm blabbering on about this is that the mechanism that we're talking about is not so different from the mechanism of exposing yourself to light. Exposing yourself to the Earth builds negative charge and therefore helps build the water inside your cell. The water is well.
Well, I want to jump in again, because this is fun for me.
Me too.
Yeah, I could tell it's super fascinating. What I'm hearing is that essentially, from a certain perspective, a certain paradigm, what we're trying to do is connect back with the geosphere, the heliosphere, and the atmosphere and the the hydrosphere, essentially, like our entire environment, the earth, sun, water, and air, essentially. So that's just one perspective I put out there based on what I'm hearing from you when you mention light, when you mention a certain stage in water, when you mention earthing. That's just kind of the simple common sense that comes back to me. But I do want to just jump in here with this and segue you through where I think you're going with this is you brought up earthing, and this is a huge thing for me. One of the things that has been shown about earthing, which is that barefoot skin to skin connection with the earth, or a permaculture term is the ecstatic skin of the earth, which I really like.
Yeah.
And what they found out is when you take somebody that has like a diabetic condition, they have thick, viscous blood. They basically, like red blood cells clump up and coagulate together, and it stops oxygen transportation. What they found out is 45 minutes of grounding can actually help disassociate those red blood cell bonds and free up somebody's blood chemistry.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but it's perfectly believable because, this is restorative. It restores, I bet, it's not just the diabetics who I know whose blood is like ketchup, and yeah, and freeing those red blood cells so that they don't clog up and block tissues and cause them to die. It's not just that. There are probably, I haven't read the entire literature, obviously, on this, but I know that studies have been done on many people with many types of issues, and this grounding or earthing is pretty powerful on many people, and it's so simple. And a variant of that, by the way, is a friend of mine was in where you come from in Northern California, and he was at a funeral for some revered person, and the story, one of the speeches, it was a story about George Washington, and apparently the story is that George Washington was ill one day, and his physician needed to help him out, and the physician said, "Well, just hug a tree." And this was new to me. I had no. Apparently, it's pretty well known, and so and good old George hugged a tree for 10 minutes and felt better after that. And so this seems bizarre and arcane, but if you think about it, the tree is negatively charged in the same way that you're negatively charged and plants are negatively charged. We've made measurements on that.
That's what I wanted to. That's exactly what I was going to segue in with you. Is that the negative charge to me is what creates the freeing of those red blood cells, because the same thing happens when you take somebody off of what I would consider positively charged based foods, like contaminated food, and you put them on green vegetable juice, or even you do someone on like spring water fasting, for example, the same exact thing happens. So that's why I want to hand it over to you in that regard about this idea around negative, enhancing our negative charge, and maybe even clarifying a little bit more your perspective on negative and positive charge as it refers to the water and also the kind of the health perspective.
Sure, happy to. So first, the juice, juicing. So it's a funny thing because I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and I was telling her about some eels that I have, and she said, "Well, you should do juicing." And I said, "Well, we were doing it a year ago, and we kind of tailed off." And so, when you think about the juice, what is juice? Well, juice. If you take a vegetable and you get rid of the solids, what you're left with is essentially the water. It's the cell water that you're drinking. See, so the cell water from plants is very very simple. So you're replacing what may be missing in your cell water with real cell water from just another species, and so it's full of easy water, and we've measured that and confirmed for various vegetables. And fruits, it's basically cell water, and the cell water is the stuff that you need for good health. So, so it makes total sense to drink. It takes a little effort to make, and some people don't often like the taste if it's filled with kale and green vegetables like that. But you kind of get used to it, and then you miss it after a while. And this is really good for your health. So it's doing the same thing. It's taking negative charge, and the negative charge, we think, comes from the easy water that's in the cells of the plant, and you're feeding this to yourself to rehydrate your cells with natural cell water. So it should be.
That
I mean, yeah.
that right there is so confirming for me. Not that I needed confirmation that this was good for you. I'm very clear on that, but this perspective is so clarifying and reinforcing for me. I can't help but just throw this last little bit out there, and I'll let it go wherever it goes. But we all have heard about acid and alkaline. For the last few years, I have come to the conclusion from an electrical, bioelectric perspective, alkaline translates into negative charge, acid translates into positive charge. Would that line up with maybe your perspective?
Totally,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah, I
got
think you
it.
put your finger on that. I think, one of the how should I put it? I hate to use the word uh, definition of life because that's not exactly it. But one of the things that life strives for is to maintain as much negativity, if you pardon the expression, as they've got it backwards. It's too bad that
I
electrons are
was
negative.
just gonna say, like, it's such a funny thing. Our colloquial language is so backwards.
Yeah, I wish we could do it. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who set that nomenclature, and it's just backwards from the way it ought to be. But I guess we're stuck with it. But we've made measurements on plants and fruits and people, and we're negatively charged. We're not neutral, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that we're negatively charged because we're mostly cells, and our cells are negatively charged. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you know you gotta you're negative. And there we have some preliminary evidence that the healthy people have more negative charge, and the unhealthy people have less negative charge. And we're going to be pursuing that in the future. But if you think about the cells in the body, this is well known that healthy cells have a big negative electrical potential, like minus 80, minus 90 millivolts. And sick cells, either pathological cells or cells on the route to death, you take them out of something and do measurements, and this negativity, when the cell becomes less negative, you can measure that very easily in cells. We've done it, others have done it. The cell becomes sick and is ready to die. Instead of minus 80 or 90, it goes to minus 50, minus 40, and cancer cells are typically minus 10 or minus 15, and pathological kidney cells are also in that area. So it means that from this preliminary evidence, it looks like what life tries to do to keep as healthy as possible is to maintain as much negative charge as possible, which translates into as much EZ water as possible, because if EZ is responsible for most of that negative charge, then the
Mm-hmm.
rehydration and the buildup of EZ water equates to the negative charge. So, and if you think about what the body does, your body, you're laughing, right?
It's beautiful. I'm totally with it.
Okay, so think about what your body does. Okay, and my body too. So we try to build this negative charge, but we got to get rid of the positive charge somehow. So how the hell do we get rid of the positive charge? Well, every time you go to the toilet and pee, um, the pH of the urine is low, which means it's got a lot of protons. So you're getting rid of positive charge every time you go to the
Mm.
toilet. But even more than that, every time you breathe out, you're breathing out carbon dioxide, water vapor. Put the two together, carbonic acid, protons. You're getting rid of protons every time you exhale. You can even check that by putting some litmus paper in the water and breathe into the water, and it'll turn acid. See, I mean that's been done many times. So you're getting, and then a third way is if you sweat. Sweat has low pH,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you're again every time you sweat, you're getting rid of protons. So all of these processes, are what if you put them all together, they're all every time something leaves your body, it leaves with protons. It gets rid of
Uh-huh.
protons
So
in an
so the
effort
waste material, basically.
to waste material. So then you ask what happens if you take a dump,
Yeah.
and well, I got to tell you that a friend of mine did the experiment, held a voltmeter, measured his negative potential, took a dump, and found that it got more negative just afterwards. So this is not a scientific experiment, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is actually true, which would mean that I think that everything that comes out of your body is positively charged. And so it's the body's effort to maintain as high a negativity as possible, because if you have too much positivity, it takes away the negativity, um, and that's antioxidants. When you talk about what do antioxidants do? Well, oxidation um, is the loss of negative charge, and
Mm.
so antioxidants prevent that negative charge from being lost. So essentially, the substances that are considered to be good antioxidants, like blueberries, for example, I think what they really do is they maintain or build the negative charge in your body, and you could call them antioxidants, if you will, and you can attribute a whole lot of different mechanisms, and maybe those mechanisms are correct, but a very simple interpretation is that they just add negative charge. So, so
Yeah, this sounds like to me what you're striving to do is deduct everything to its most simple principles.
exactly.
And what it also sounds like to me through this conversation is that let's take antioxidants as a humongous subject. And basically, from the example that we had kind of gone over with that protein molecule in the easy water it's bathing in, again with the antioxidants, it's probably no different that they only function appropriately within the medium of that easy water, right? Same
Well,
concept.
I don't know if that's true.
Or they have the easy water present in them, like a blueberry, for example.
Yeah, they do. Sure,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, it's a biological substance. It's There's cells, and cells have easy water, right? And probably, um, yeah. One of my students, I haven't. It's been a while. Measured that blueberries have a lot of negative charge in them, so it just might boil down to simply transferring negative charge from that entity, the blueberry, to you. And it may be as simple as that, and building
Oh,
your
I
negative
see.
charge.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that kind of flipped a switch.
Yeah,
Um,
we got
mhm.
a problem with simplicity. Science used to be, we had the principle of Occam's razor. You got,
Yes, I'm
you know,
familiar. Yeah.
you take the simpler of any two options, it's likely to be correct. But
Hmm.
in science these days, that's given way to a kind of emphasis on complexity instead of simplicity. That many of my colleagues will like to stand up there and make a presentation and say, "Well, look how complicated it is," and parenthetically, "Look how smart I am because
Hmm.
my issue is very complex, and I'm smart enough to be able to understand all this huge complexity." But I guess philosophically, I feel exactly the opposite. That what we need to do to find truth is to look towards simplicity and not complexity. So. In my thinking, I like to try to boil down issues into the simplest possible realms. I guess I've done science long enough to feel that I'm entitled to a philosophy, and that philosophy is, hey, keep things simple. They should be simple
Hmm.
enough, as Niels Bohr said, to be able to explain it to your grandmother. I guess in Niels Bohr's day, grandmothers didn't have PhDs in physics. Now they do. So yeah.
I love it. I really resonate with that and everything that you've laid out. It's actually I have to say, preparing for this interview, I was intimidated is not the right word, but I was not totally sure of myself in terms of exactly how to direct the sales or exactly what our conversation would look like. But this was very easy.
Well, fun for
Very,
me.
yeah, and fun. This was a lot of fun, actually, and I felt extremely engaged with it, and that we're able to bounce off each other. And you made it very simple, is what I'm getting at, in that I actually completely understand the basic principles of what you're sharing, and I think the audience is going to get it too. And there's more that I would, now that I'm actually wanting to go deeper into with you, but I will propose the final question given our time constraints. With everything that you've shared, I know the question is going to be this: what kind of water has the most easy in it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Uh, you know, I get phone calls, emails practically daily. What kind of water should I drink? And frankly, the question is slightly different from yours. I don't know which one has the most easy water in it. We do have ways of checking, but you know, there's so many waters that we've not checked, so I can't really.
And you do some kind of actual measurement testing with these waters?
Uh, Only, you might say, frivolously. We
Okay.
don't we don't sort of collect waters and test each one beside the other. Um, and but I got to say, at this closing, that we've proposed to do that. You know, this question is looming. Everybody wants to know, what kind of water should I drink? Those people who really understand the that how hydration is so critically important. By the way, just before I go into that interjection, I guess probably some of your readers are familiar with the almost classical book written by a guy with a long name, but short
Dr.
name's Bat.
Batman Gailage?
Right, Batman.
Yes.
Right.
Batman.
Okay, Batman.
Uh-huh.
And it's a great book. His son told me that it sold more than 7 million copies on Amazon.
Wow.
You know, it's called "You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty,"
Uh-huh.
and so this he demonstrated clinically, not with the standard clinical trials. He was unable to do that. He was thrown in prison in Iran, and as a political prisoner, he did most of his experiments taking care of the other prisoners. And what he found is that no matter what issue they had, whether it was diabetes or some heart issue or whatever, just drink a lot of water and you get better. And it's a pretty simple message, and most people have known when they were kids, their grandparent or parent said, "Oh, make sure you drink a lot of water." We kind of know that, but most of us don't take it so seriously. However, the question is, which water shall we drink? And you say, well, which one has the most easy water? And I'd also think, but we have to demonstrate, I think that the water that contains the most easy water, most easy, highest easy fraction in it, will probably be the one that's most healthful. But we don't know that for sure. And we don't know which waters are the best in terms of which pathology. There are waters out there where there seems to be evidence that certain pathologies are reversible simply by drinking the water. I know two sources specifically who claim that, and where the evidence is actually there. So 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 we want to conduct these tests. We have the capacity to do it because, number one, we know something about water, and number two, we're not making water to sell, and so we have no financial interest in which water is better than which other water. It's really hard to get the money to conduct those tests. We need a few $1 million to do it properly, to investigate, for example, what kind of water, spring water, or which spring water, or various other manufactured waters are best to reverse tumors. And it seems that it may be possible to do so with certain kinds of waters, but one needs to know. So we're prepared to carry out those tests, I think, in an effective way. But the government and government agencies are mostly interested in testing drugs, not testing water. So it's really hard to break through and convey some understanding that there are really simple ways that could be extremely effective if we're able to test and pursue this to find out which one. So if some of your listeners are interested in helping to support something like this, I'd be happy to hear from them. This is a giant question for humanity, and it could conceivably provide a simple answer to questions of how to stay healthy. So maybe I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get the conundrum. And I certainly have my own kind of theories and my own experience. I just say it kind of sounds like to me that we're almost talking about basically like the water that has the most microcluster structure in it, that's most quote unquote structured. We hear that term a lot. It means a little something different to me than what it might mean to someone else, but essentially that kind of seems to be what the case is. Do you agree with that, or?
I think it's probably true, but we need experiments, objective experiments, to confirm whether this is true or not true. And it may be that certain types of water are actually effective against all pathologies, because after all, the water is everywhere. Or it might be that certain types of water are good for one pathology, but not necessarily for another.
Unless the water has pathogens in it.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a different issue.
Well,
But
that's I don't want to go on a tangent, but I just have to think the paradox is that Dr. Batman Gailage was treating people with prison water.
well, and even that water seemed to have worked.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, well, I guess we have some ability to fight off the pathogens, but the water itself, it's is the fluid of life, and
Right.
you need to make sure that you got enough of it. That was his book was a powerful message, I think. So, yeah, just final word back to the vegetable juice. I've come into contact with many people who deal in alternative medicine, and these are mostly thinking people. And many of them, the patient walks in, and no matter what the problem, it doesn't matter. The first thing they say is start juicing, and they report that inevitably they come back and whatever, and by 6 months later they not only feel much better, but they've lost weight somehow. It might be the energy that's contained in this water that you drink, but you don't therefore need as much food to get the energy that you require. But the effectiveness of this is really high. So we're going to go back to this starting Saturday, I think, to juicing. I think it's really important and effective. But
Absolutely.
it's the water.
Yeah, I'm again. I just think that was such a profound connecting of the dots that you made with the juicing and with water. And I was. I know we don't really have any more time, but I'm just gonna round it out. I was really going to jump into you if you had. If you had noticed or in your research ever come across like the science of raw living foods in relation to the water content of the food, because that's one of the primary differences between cooked plant food and raw water-rich food is that it has its water content in it, but when you cook it, it volatilizes the water out. It cooks the water out. So that to me started getting my wheels turning, like, wow, okay, it's probably the water that's the primary catalyst in juicing, obviously.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. Sure, when you heat it, it's not the same anymore, and almost certainly the water is not the same anymore. So, yeah, the fresh raw vegetables would presumably be the best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Makes total sense.
Right. Oh, thank you so much for coming on,
Oh, my
Dr.
pleasure.
Pollack. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I hope you hope it's been helpful and useful, and thanks a lot for inviting me.
Yeah, where can people find out about your work, about your book, and if people want to be able to support you, where are all the resources for that?
Well, I'm easy to find. My email is I'm at the University of Washington in Seattle, so if I can give my email, but it's just nobody will remember it. So, but it's easy to find on the internet. I'm not hidden away somewhere. The book. I think the book is really I guess the best place to find out about all this stuff, and the reviews have been amazing. I must say, if my
Mm-hmm.
mother were alive, she'd be posting them on the wall. I think they're very nice. People talk about the readability of it and the message, and that's easy to get either through Amazon. Or the publisher's website. It's Ebner and Sons, EBNERANDSONS.com. And yeah, those are probably the best. There's a TED Talk, a kind of simple presentation of what we found. If you just look under my name, Gerald Pollack, TED or TEDx, you'll find it easily. And this is a 22 or 23-minute um, quick presentation of the essence of what we found about the fourth phase of water.
Mm-hmm.
So it's becoming rather popular. I mean, especially the book, and a lot of people have expressed interest. So it's gratifying, but we're excited also about the practical applications of it, and there are many. One of them is, as I mentioned, in terms of health. This is so important, and I only wish that it were possible to get the money to do the studies that we'd like to do to make it clear for everybody, which waters are the best for our health. I'd like to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I'm definitely putting out the the good vibes for you that you'll finally be able to get all that's needed for that. And for everyone listening, definitely check out Dr. Pollack's TED Talk. That's a fantastic TED Talk and very just well laid out, like all the information laid out in the book and also on this conversation. So again, thank you so much for joining us. It was a total pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ronnie. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And hello to all you out there.
Mm. And everyone listening, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the official Ronnie Landis podcast show. I know that you guys, if you're still listening to this, you obviously enjoyed this as much as I did. And check out Dr. Gerald Pollack's work. And until next time, see you on the next episode. Aloha.
Aloha to you.